Thank you very much, Stephen. It's delightful to be back here in Tromsø and the high north. I'm going to talk about the Arctic in a broader international context. Until now, the Arctic has been a relatively geopolitics-free zone. Regional cooperation has flourished even in the face of mounting international tensions, particularly between Russia and the West. Arctic cooperation has highlighted the virtues of multilateralism at a time when multilateralism is in crisis in many other parts of the world. And more generally, we can see that the Arctic is acquiring a much higher profile in international relations. It's no longer a backwater, but an area of rising strategic, economic, and especially environmental importance. But ladies and gentlemen, it seems to me that it is exactly in this that lies our greatest challenge. The increased profile and importance of the Arctic has the potential to undermine existing achievements and to introduce new and often unpalatable realities. The era of comfortable obscurity is over. And several major variables are transforming the strategic environment in the Arctic. I'll briefly run through them. The first and most influential is global climate change, specifically the melting of the Arctic ice. Once hypothetical ventures such as the Northern Sea route and the exploitation of Russia's liquefied natural gas resources have become reality. The stakes today are so much higher and so much more visible. Climate change is the single greatest accelerant in the geopoliticization of the Arctic. The second variable, the emergence of a more assertive, confident, and nationalistic Russian foreign policy, along with the deterioration of Moscow's relations with the West. These have meant that the region is no longer insulated from larger geopolitical and security tensions. Witness Russia's military buildup in the region. Also, the increasingly aggressive stance of the Trump administration. The good old days in which Arctic cooperation enjoyed a relative immunity from troubles elsewhere, those days are over, ladies and gentlemen. Third, the rise of China, an increasingly globalist Chinese foreign policy, and of course mounting strategic tensions between Beijing and Washington, they will also play out in the Arctic. Now, the region is unlikely to become the primary area of US-China confrontation, but the potential for collateral damage is nevertheless considerable. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's rather provocative remarks in Rovaniemi last year, they foreshadow not just an escalation in words, but also an escalation in actions. And then fourth variable, the very notion of an international rules-based order has become widely discredited. It's no longer clear what the rules are, who makes the rules, and also who abides by the rules. Now, until now, the Arctic has been a success story of the rules-based order, as embodied by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and other regional arrangements such as the Arctic Council. But a regional Arctic order will struggle to survive against the background of a disintegrating international system and great power nationalism, what I call the New World disorder. So we have two choices looking forward. The first is to hope against hope that existing regional mechanisms, supplemented by UNCLOS, can somehow preserve the relative geopolitical peace we have enjoyed until now. But ladies and gentlemen, I believe that such a passive course is unsustainable in the longer term. Like it or not, and many of us here don't like it, the Arctic is no longer a regional, but a global preoccupation with global consequences. So the second option is to begin work on developing new arrangements to support peace and security and development in the Arctic. The idea here is not to abandon the mechanisms we already have, but rather to build on them. Institutions such as the Arctic Council, the Barents Euro-Arctic Council, would continue to function, but they would be supplemented by global arrangements reflecting the evolving place of the Arctic in global, not regional, affairs. And chief among such arrangements might be a new Arctic treaty. Such a treaty would not just cover scientific and environmental issues, but also include political and security provisions. It would, among other things, encompass rules, freedom of navigation, force deployments, and security confidence building measures. Now, the Arctic states might view such a treaty as impinging on their sovereignty. I disagree. An Arctic treaty would rather confirm a wider international legitimacy and recognize the special status of the Arctic states. In this connection, one idea might be to establish a kind of permanent 8 along the lines of the P5 in the UN Security Council. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm under no illusions. Achieving agreement on such an Arctic treaty would be protracted and enormously challenging. The obstacles are formidable. It's a process that will take years, possibly even decades. But my essential point is this: relying on the existing framework is no longer an option. The status quo is unsustainable. The institutions that have served us well until now will not be sufficient as the Arctic goes increasingly global. Do nothing, and we risk sleepwalking into conflict. So we must look ahead, especially when the future is rushing at us with extraordinary speed. And indeed, the very process of negotiating an Arctic treaty, which is a case of global rather than merely regional multilateralism, would concentrate international efforts to address the greatest security challenge of the 21st century, namely the physical degradation of our planet. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.